It's an early morning in Roswell, New Mexico, and the date is November 11th, 1962. Although the weather that day might have been fairly routine for Roswell, an area famously associated with UFO legends, nobody could have guessed that a future Hollywood icon was entering the world. This tiny baby girl named Demetria Jean Gaines at birth would later become known to millions by another name, Demi Moore. At that moment, her parents, Charles Harmon and Virginia King, could never have anticipated how vast and unique her trajectory would be. Yet her childhood was anything but standard. This was a family saga that involved heartbreak, secrets, and surprising turns, all helping shape a future star who would challenge Hollywood norms, spark controversies, and shift the conversation about what it meant to be a powerful female presence in an industry historically dominated by men. Demi's early days were marked by instability. Her biological father, Charles Harmon, parted ways with her mother, Virginia, shortly before Demi was born. The result was that Demi grew up without any direct relationship to her biological father, and that missing piece of her identity would become a recurring theme in her life. In her infancy and early childhood, the only paternal figure she knew was Dan Gaines, a traveling salesman her mother married not long after splitting from Charles. Dan provided some semblance of family structure, but the situation was far from tranquil. With the new marriage came the new surname of Gaines for the young Demi, and that's the name she would identify with throughout most of her childhood. Though she was too young to articulate it, this entire situation already placed a certain emotional weight on her, a feeling of not fully understanding who she was or where she came from. A particularly intriguing detail from her childhood involved her eyes, one hazel, one green. Even in small ways, she stood out from the crowd. People might have noticed that her gaze was slightly mismatched, but no one could have predicted that this physical quirk was just a subtle hint at a personality and destiny that would soon diverge from the norm in far more dramatic ways. If you talk to those who crossed paths with Demi as a kid, they often described her as guarded but alert. She had a curiosity about the world that belied her tumultuous household, and perhaps that mismatched gaze was an outward metaphor for the duality she was already living, caught between different parental figures, uncertain of her own origins. By the time Demi reached her early teen years, her life was filled with flux. Her mother and stepfather moved often, following Dan's changing job prospects. This constant uprooting prevented her from forging stable friendships, and with each new place she had to adapt and figure out social survival strategies. Then, at age 13, in one of those quiet, earth-shattering moments that abruptly reshape a person's sense of self, Demi discovered that Charles Harmon was not just an absent figure. He was, in fact, her biological father. She found documents that confirmed everything she had feared, but never quite had proof of. The father she'd believed to be her real dad, Dan, was essentially her stepfather. This secret cast so much about her life into a harsh new light. That knowledge could have destroyed her sense of identity, but in some ways it did the opposite. It gave her a kind of internal power. Even if the truth was painful, at least she had it. While some teenagers might have crumbled under that revelation, Demi turned it into a type of defiance that would shape her entire approach to life. She saw that the adults around her were all too human, grappling with addiction, depression, and deceit. In a world that seemed unpredictable, she quickly learned she had to rely on herself. That same unpredictability struck again when Dan, her stepfather, the only paternal figure she really knew, took his own life while Demi was still in her teens. This tragedy further underlined the shaky ground on which her early life was built. If her household had once represented a place of incomplete truths, It was now something darker and more tragic. Home wasn't a safe haven. It was a minefield of emotional eruptions. Faced with these brutal realities, she responded by building up her armor. Being forced to contend with themes of life, death, and fragile family bonds at such a tender age imbued her with an unvarnished perspective on the world. It also gave her a deeper emotional reservoir to draw from later when she would become an actress, known for roles requiring both vulnerability and tenacity. Amid this personal chaos, Demi found it progressively harder to stay in school. By 16, she decided she'd had enough. Dropping out of high school was not a rash move as much as a reflection of her environment and mindset. The classroom was not where her real lessons were happening anyway. Her real education was coming from the heartbreaks and upheavals at home, from the desperate need to make her own way. Stepping away from formal schooling wasn't just about academic disinterest. It was a statement of independence in a life that often seemed to spiral out of her control. In the swirling uncertainty of those teenage years, she discovered that she lived near another rising actress, Nastasia Kinski, who encouraged her to look into modeling or acting. By 17, Demi had already made decisions that could be seen as both impulsive and heartbreakingly human. She fell for Freddie Moore, a rock musician older than her, already married in fact, and she poured her youthful spirit into that relationship. When Freddie's divorce came through, they wasted no time tying the knot. Demi took his last name, and although their marriage wouldn't last more than a few years, the surname Moore stuck. It was more than a name. It was a brand that would one day resonate on movie posters around the world. One might say that Demi was searching for stability, or perhaps searching for love that she never quite received in her childhood. Or maybe she was simply restless, yearning for change, excitement, and a sense that she was moving forward on her own terms. Marrying Freddie Moore was a kind of escape, but also an introduction into a creative scene with music and performing at its core. When that first marriage ended, Demi held on to the Moore name. Even back then, she had begun to realize that identity was something you construct for yourself, and she was comfortable embracing Demi Moore as her professional moniker, her calling card in an industry that thrives on memorable names. She soon discovered she had a knack for getting attention, not simply for her striking looks, but also for an underlying intensity in her performances. Early modeling jobs paid the bills, and small acting parts gave her a taste of what it meant to be in front of a camera, to embody a role and project feelings that would captivate an audience. She was no overnight sensation, but she was ambitious, and she understood that hustle was part of the deal. That hustle started paying off when, in 1985, she was cast in St. Elmo's Fire, a film that would become a pop culture marker of its era. The movie was essentially a who's who of young Hollywood up-and-comers, many of whom were labeled the Brat Pack. For Demi, this offered two gifts. It gave her a breakout role that elevated her visibility in a big way, and it introduced her to a group of peers who, for better or worse, were about to define youth culture on screen. Yet the Brat Pack nickname felt demeaning to her. She wanted to be recognized for her talent and hard work, rather than being lumped into a dismissive category of pretty young things. Still, the association broadened her appeal, and her face on the movie poster captured the attention of fans who were drawn to the film's dramatization of post-college disillusionment. However, that same year, she faced another critical turning point. Her struggles with substance use nearly cost her the role. It was a wake-up call, a moment that foreshadowed the rocky path she would often walk between personal battles and professional achievements. Riding the wave of St. Elmo's Fire, Demi started snagging roles that showcase both her comedic and dramatic range, appearing in projects like About Last Night and One Crazy Summer. She was building a versatile toolkit as an actress, shifting between genres with surprising ease. Hollywood loves to pigeonhole actors, but Demi resisted that from the start, seeking out roles that wouldn't confine her to just one type. Behind that determination was a sense that she was done with letting other people define her identity. She had already endured a life shaped by secrets and sudden tragedies. If she was going to thrive as a performer, she would do it on her own terms. As the 80s rolled into the 90s, Demi Moore stepped into a new stratosphere of fame that few actors experience, propelled by two huge hits, Ghost in 1990 and A Few Good Men in 1992. Ghost, in particular, was a phenomenon. Its combination of romance, supernatural elements, and heartbreak capturing global audiences. Suddenly, Demi was no longer just a promising starlet. She was commanding leading roles in major blockbusters and receiving top billing. The industry took notice. The public, including young women who saw in Demi a figure of confidence and complexity, embraced her wholeheartedly. Ghost, with its iconic pottery scene, became part of cinematic history, and Demi's on-screen chemistry with Patrick Swayze made her a household name. Then, A Few Good Men cast her alongside Tom Cruise and Jack Nicholson, further solidifying her place among Hollywood's most bankable stars. During this period of ascending fame, she also found love again. This time, it was with action star Bruce Willis, already known for his hard-edged charm in the Die Hard franchise. Their relationship was a media magnet from day one. The couple's decision to wed spontaneously in Las Vegas on November 21, 1987, officiated by none other than the legendary Little Richard, added a dash of rock and roll flamboyance to an otherwise romantic union. Some might have seen it as impulsive, but for Demi, it was another example of living life on her terms. Hollywood watchers were enthralled by this new power couple. Both were at the peak of their careers, and they radiated a carefree kind of excitement about forging a life together. Over the next several years, Demi and Bruce welcomed 3 daughters, Rumor in 1988, Scout in 1991, and Tallulah in 1994. Motherhood had always been important to Demi. With the turbulence of her own upbringing fresh in her memory, she placed tremendous value on creating a nurturing environment for her children. Despite the paparazzi, the movie sets, and the constant swirl of tabloids that hovered around high-profile celebrities, Demi seemed determined to give her daughters a chance at normalcy. Family life became a refuge, at least to the extent it could, where the illusions of Hollywood had less significance. But life was never simple for Demi, and that included her relationships with her own parents. Around 1990, she tried to help her mother, Virginia, who was struggling with substance abuse, by checking her into rehab. It was a courageous, if risky, attempt to mend a fractured bond. Unfortunately, it didn't have the fairy tale outcome Demi had hoped for. Her mother left the program early, and the disappointment was crushing. After years of trying to reconcile her love for her mother with the heartbreak her mother's actions had caused, Demi decided she had no choice but to cut off contact for a while. It was an agonizing choice, but sometimes self-preservation demands walking away, even from family. This painful chapter illustrated another hallmark of Demi's life: her willingness to draw boundaries, to protect her own mental and emotional health, something many people find extraordinarily difficult, especially in the glare of public scrutiny. Yet that very public attention would soon focus on Demi in a way that was both scandalous and groundbreaking. In August 1991, she posed nude while 7 months pregnant for the cover of Vanity Fair. The image captured by famed photographer Annie Leibovitz ignited debates across the country about motherhood, body autonomy, and media standards. Some denounced it as tasteless and provocative. Others hailed it as a celebration of motherhood and female empowerment. Either way, it was impossible to ignore. The cover was plastered everywhere, setting off cultural conversations about how society perceives pregnant bodies. In a way, Demi was ahead of her time. She had turned her pregnancy into a statement that women needn't hide their bodies, especially when bringing life into the world. For a Hollywood actress known for her sex appeal, to display her pregnant form so boldly was revolutionary, and it remains one of the most iconic magazine covers in history. On screen, Demi continued to make waves with roles that often courted controversy. In 1993, she starred in Indecent Proposal, playing a woman who, alongside her husband, contemplates an offer of $1 million for a single night with a wealthy stranger. The storyline was hotly debated. Some audiences were intrigued by the moral dilemma. Others felt it was exploitative. Either way, it reaffirmed Demi's pattern of choosing projects that sparked dialogue. She was no stranger to risk-taking, whether personal or professional, and Indecent Proposal solidified her reputation as a major lead actress, unafraid of edgy material. By the mid-90s, Hollywood's love affair with Demi's star power reached a crescendo. In 1996, she headlined Striptease and reportedly received a then record-breaking salary of $12.5 million, briefly making her the highest-paid actress in Hollywood. This figure was astounding, a sign that the industry acknowledged both her drawing power and her negotiation savvy. Of course, the film itself was lambasted by many critics, earning her a Golden Raspberry Award, Razzie, and overshadowing the historical significance of her paycheck. But from a broader perspective, that payday was a major milestone for women in entertainment, proof that an actress could command a salary on par with or exceeding that of many leading men. That alone was a seismic shift in the Hollywood pay landscape. Nevertheless, 1996 and 1997 also marked a period where Demi faced a barrage of criticism for the projects she chose. With both Striptease and The Juror panned by reviewers, she collected some of her harshest press. Critics labeled her Demi Moore, suggesting her focus was on big paychecks rather than artistic merit. It was a lazy critique, perhaps, but such is the nature of tabloid culture, especially when it concerns a woman who doesn't neatly conform to expectations. The negativity took its toll, and by 1998, Demi made a bold decision to step away from the Hollywood maelstrom. She chose to relocate with her daughters to Hailey, Idaho, a place far removed from the paparazzi-laden streets of Los Angeles. In doing so, she demonstrated again that self-preservation and her role as a mother mattered more than chasing roles at any cost. Around this time, her marriage to Bruce Willis was also reaching its conclusion. They separated around 1998 and finalized their divorce in 2000. Yet to the surprise of some cynics, they maintained a cooperative relationship post-divorce, co-parenting their children with commendable unity. In an era when Hollywood divorces typically become tabloid fodder, their ability to remain amicable was somewhat refreshing. They might have been a high-profile couple, but they were still parents first and foremost, determined to protect their daughter's well-being. For a while, Demi receded from the limelight, focusing on raising her girls in Idaho. When she did reappear on the big screen in the early 2000s, it was often in cameo roles or smaller parts, such as her memorable turn in Charlie's Angels, Full Throttle, in 2003. The cameo was proof that even when absent, Demi's star power hadn't dimmed completely. Audiences loved seeing her flex comedic and action chops, especially playing somewhat against type. Hollywood sometimes struggles to offer meaty roles to actresses over a certain age, but Demi was determined to show she still had plenty to offer. Then in 2003, the tabloids lit up once more when Demi began dating Ashton Kutcher, 15 years her junior and fresh off the success of That 70s Show. The media wasted no time labeling their relationship as a cougar scenario, but once again, Demi upended expectations. In 2005, they married, and for a while, the public was fascinated by the two. Some were cynical, but it was tough to deny the genuine affection they seemed to share. During this time, the gossip mill also churned out rumors linking Demi to various younger male celebrities, but rarely did any of those stories have real substance. It was almost as if the tabloids couldn't accept that a woman in her 40s might simply be enjoying life without the constraints of outdated societal norms. Yet despite some initial skepticism, the union with Kutcher lasted a solid 6 years before cracks started appearing in 2011, when reports circulated that Ashton had been unfaithful on their wedding anniversary. The fallout was swift, and by 2012, Demi and Ashton were officially divorced. It was another public heartbreak. But if there's one thing her history had taught her, it's how to regroup and push forward. In the midst of these ups and downs, there was also a moment of reconciliation with her mother, Virginia. In 1998, Virginia was dying of cancer. Despite the years of estrangement and the earlier frustrations Demi had experienced, particularly around Virginia's inability to overcome her addictions, Demi managed to forgive her mother and offered support in her final months. It was a poignant, bittersweet ending to a relationship so fraught with pain. Losing her mother in July of that same year was another emotional milestone, but also a release of sorts. By granting forgiveness, Demi freed herself from years of resentment. It was a closure not everyone finds when dealing with a troubled parent. Throughout her career, Demi also occasionally produced films, some under her own production company, often overshadowed by more high-profile business moves in Hollywood, but no less important to her. She was a producer on the enormously popular Austin Powers films, demonstrating that her influence extended beyond the roles she took on as an actress. Despite some commercial flops and savage reviews, her presence behind the scenes was steady, never as attention-grabbing as her roles in front of the camera, but indicative of a broader ambition and an effort to shape the stories she felt deserved to be told. This ambition, however, did not spare her from further controversies. The media sometimes fixated on rumored friction on movie sets, or gossiped about her alleged high demands and sky-high paychecks. The nickname Demi Moore was a lazy attempt to undermine her achievements by painting her as greedy. Yet if one takes a broader perspective, it's clear she was an early pioneer in demanding compensation that reflected her box office draw, a practice that male stars engaged in for years without similar criticism. That double standard is part of what made Demi's journey emblematic of a generation of actresses who fought for equal pay, respect, and autonomy in an industry that had long objectified women. Who could forget her cropped pixie cut from Ghost? That haircut arguably became one of the most copied hairstyles of the early 90s, turning everyday people into Demi lookalikes at salons around the country. And while G.I. Jane didn't fare brilliantly with critics or at the box office, her bold decision to shave her head for the role led to yet another moment that stuck in our collective memory. Hollywood rarely sees female stars so readily transform their looks for roles, but Demi never hesitated. Perhaps it was because of that rebellious streak seeded in her youth, or maybe it was just her way of proving that female actors aren't restricted to being glamorized objects of desire. Over time, She gathered multiple Golden Globe nominations but never snagged an Oscar nod, despite her prominent status in 1990s Hollywood. It's interesting that some of the very roles that soared at the box office, like Ghost and Indecent Proposal, weren't necessarily the kind that earn Academy votes. Yet her star power was undeniable. For a stretch of the 90s, she was one of the most highly paid actresses in the world, representing a new model of female stardom, confident, sexy, and unapologetic about using her leverage to negotiate big deals. Demi Moore's journey proves that fame doesn't shield anyone from pain, but it also shows the power of persistence, vulnerability, and self-discovery. Whether she was redefining beauty standards, battling personal demons, or reclaiming her life after heartbreak, Moore has remained a powerful, enduring figure in Hollywood. What's your favorite Demi Moore performance or moment? Let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss a look behind the spotlight. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.